Hey everyone, and welcome to Bright and Early, the podcast for people building early stage startups. I'm your host, Brian Ray. I talk to entrepreneurs, product people, designers, and marketing pros to learn what works, what doesn't, and how can we apply those lessons to our business. My guest today is Jack McDade, the ultimate webmaster. Jack is the designer, developer, and creator of Statamic, a Laravel-based CMS that makes creating and maintaining a website fun again. That is not his tagline, that is mine. He also writes a fantastic newsletter for rebels and dreamers that you can sign up to receive at jackmcdade.com. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I love your tagline. I'm totally stealing it.
Well, it was my first introduction to you and your work. Actually, was somebody was talking about getting off of WordPress, which my personal site was on WordPress, and just it's become a behemoth over the years. Whatever. I don't need to slam WordPress too much.
No need to.
But why not? And that's how I heard about Statamic. So. I'm a huge personal fan. So for listeners who are familiar with you and your work, can you just give us a bit of background on what you've been up to over the past 5 or so years?
Yeah. So I started building Statamic 7 years ago, actually, after kind of coming out of the what is the best CMS for me and my clients sort of world, like doing the agency thing, then starting my own little freelance, one-man, two-man shop kind of deal. And nothing ever felt right. Like nothing fit the workflow I was looking for. And I felt like I was spending way more time like configuring and bootstrapping and managing the part of the site that wasn't the site, right? Like the DevOps and all of that. And so I thought, all right, what if we got rid of all that and just like put everything in version control? And could we build a CMS that has the features you expect without a database so that you can do everything in your code editor, so you could use Git to do deployments and all that? And 7 years later, the answer is finally, as of like 6.5 minutes ago, yes, you can do it. If the last couple of years have been really good. Statamic is our full-time gig now. We're a 3-person company.
Okay.
And we're growing. Like it works. We've found ways of kind of carving some audience out of like WordPress expats and expression engine expats, or people who are coming from other platforms that want more control over their their structure and their code and their site.
Yep.
And, it's been working.
So you were a freelance designer and developer, having to find ways to work with WordPress or Perch, Jekyll. Can I just take some guesses?
Absolutely. I've tried all of those. Yep. Expression Engine was the one I did the most of.
Okay.
But definitely not exclusively. Yeah. Tried it all. Tried everything.
All right. Does that continue to be your target market? Is freelance designers, developers who need to create a custom site for a client?
That's definitely our core audience. Yeah.
Okay.
It's especially like a bespoke site. If you're looking for a generic theme you want to kind of plop on there, fill in the boxes, WordPress does that pretty well. I feel like at this point, just keep doing that. But if you have a custom site that you have a unique design, a unique personality, you don't know where it's going to go, you don't want to rely on 30 different plugins from 30 different add-on developers or plugin developers to hope that they all talk to each other. Yeah, Statamic is a much more opinionated and efficient platform for that sort of approach.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the add-on. They're called add-ons for Statamic, but the plug-in ecosystem of WordPress. I really want to dig into that a little bit later. So for now, though, in the timeline, like when did you go full time on Statamic and begin to start saying no to client work, or do you still do some client work? Like what's the balance like for you as a self-employed person who makes money on the internet?
Yeah. Recently, actually. So probably in the last, let's say August, the last 9 or 10 months, like maybe as much as about a year ago was the last time we kind of took a new client project. You know how clients go, sometimes they never really go away, but it's like 5 minutes. So if you're a client of mine out there, I didn't delete your website. We're just not doing any active work for anybody anymore. It took, I would say 5 years to know if that was even going to be a possibility. And there's it's not just me. If it was just me, I probably could have done it sooner. But I don't like working alone, and my skill set, while I do the full stack thing, like the nitty gritty architecture stuff is not my specialty. So I always wanted to have someone else who kind of slid heavier into the deep code, and that would let me slide more to the other direction, like the marketing and the design side.
Okay.
So if I wanted to do it all, I probably could have gone full time a couple of years ago, but didn't want to.
Yeah. So who are the other people working on Statamic with you, and what's the division of responsibilities like?
Yeah, Jason Varga, he's in Miami, and Jesse Elite is in Canada, like near London, Ontario. And both of them are really, really good, like Laravel, PHP, Vue.js developers, front end, back end. I take care of all the UI design, UX stuff. And like, that's kind of like where I own it totally, completely.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else, we share responsibility. We all do support. We all work on the documentation. I like the final visual and written polish always comes through me. That's kind of where I take full ownership.
Yeah. And you, in your personal work, like you are really doing the 80s aesthetic.
Yes.
Well, you're doing it right. When did you start to pull that into your design vocabulary?
I was born in 83, so I would say 1984 or 19. Probably a couple of years ago, right? So maybe I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I really started to lean heavily into it. And I think a lot of the way design and fashion really works is it's a response to whatever you're bored of, right? So we kind of came out of that hyper minimalistic, like Swiss design style that's like big, chunky, clean fonts on white background and like
Helvetica,
a black,
everything.
Totally. Helvetica, all the things. And you're like, oh my God, there's no personality left on the internet. There's nothing. And it's like, well, what if I just dumped a bucket of hot pink and like throw some palm trees on it, maybe some lasers? Like, man, it'll stand out. And I think that's the reason why I did it. One, I'm a huge 80s fan. Like, obviously, like if there was a podcast who would do 6 hours of like, I don't know, like Cobra Kai theories, like I'm on board. Like, come at me. But it's really as a brand decision for the company, taking the Statamic branding into that 80s, kind of early 90s, like bright, bold color stuff. Yeah. It's a response, like it's a way of standing out. Like you need to look different than everybody else for them to even remember you. Because most of the time people come to your site, you're like, I don't know, maybe it looks fine, looks like everything else. And then it takes 2 or 3 more times of like someone else saying, you really should check out product XYZ. And like, all right, I'll look at it. Like, I don't know, looks like product LMNOP. Like, I don't get it. But if it's that thing you knew you looked at and you come back a second time, like, oh yeah, this is the site with like the friggin' animated kitten eyes or whatever it is, right? Like, I remember this. I remember thinking it was interesting, but I'd check it out later. Now it's later. Let's look at it. So it's like connecting, like standing out enough that people remember when they encounter you over and over again. And that paid off for us. I really think that's the number one thing that took us from like a part-time side gig to a full-time business, was standing out and being memorable in a world where there's a new product shipping since we started recording this is 3 new JavaScript frameworks and 5 new content management systems. Like that's just the way it is.
Why do you talk about that a little bit more, because your core audience is developers, right? So why is it that design became such an important thing, or talk a little bit more about why you think that truly is what helped to set you apart and is responsible for so much of your growth?
In order for someone to decide to use you, if it's a product that does something you already do, right? So let's take like WordPress for an example, because everybody knows WordPress. In order to use Statamic, you need to quit using WordPress. Okay, so you already know how to do it. You know all the works. You know like what plugins to use, assuming you're a WordPress developer, right? So if I'm going to look at something else, I need to quit doing what I know and start using something new from the beginning, like full learning curve. What do I know? What do I not know? who's who, who's the big add-on developer here, who's trustworthy, right? And if there's no easy way to learn that quickly, and to build that trust quickly, you just quit. You just don't do it. Mm. It's easier to stay with what you know. So for me, I think that the design and the brand, when it stands out enough that you can't be ignored, like you keep encountering it over and over again, and the design encourages you to read the content, and the content is even more important than the design. The content holds your attention. You're like, oh, it's actually it's kind of playful and it's sort of fun, and it's talking to me. Yes, this sounds like me. I do a lot of writing in first person active tense. It just immediately feels like you're in it with someone mm-hmm. And it works. I think it's super important. There's so much bad content and bad design out there. You just grab Bootstrap or some template, slap your words in there. You throw your 6 blocks of icons and your feature bullets, and you're like, ta-da, come use us. And then nobody uses you. And so you pretend that everybody's using you. You find someone to write a review, and, hopefully you've got a sense of humor about it. And you're like, everything's great, until they write the blog post like, how I almost killed myself by trying, we've all read the blog post. And, I'm not saying design and copywriting fixes it all, but if you have a good product and your design is not memorable and your content is lazy, mm-hmm. it doesn't matter. You are going to have a very hard time convincing people.
Yes. Yeah. Your document, it's funny that you mentioned that about your documentation. Your documentation is clever and funny.
Thank you.
And it is extremely helpful. It's just, it seems like this comes easy to you. It just flows out of you naturally. So do you have an unfair advantage there?
I do. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I was just born with it. I'm kind of half kidding. It really is something most of my life I've loved writing. And I love the English language and finding clever twists on words, not finding more complicated words like a thesaurus, more like combinations of words you haven't heard. And how can I write something without using a cliche? Every time I read at the end of the day or as a whole, or, those cliches just drive me crazy. And so every one of those is an opportunity. Every cliche in your content is an opportunity to be interesting or funny, if that applies, or memorable. Mm-hmm. Every time you use a cliche, it's a chance for people to forget you, to distrust you, and to close the tab, honestly.
That is I was about to say, what a great rule of thumb. We need a better way to say that.
What a fantastic, it's hard. I'm better at doing this with my fingers than with my tongue. What a splendiferous approach towards life hacking. No, that's terrible. I don't know, right? But you play with it for a minute, and you find something that works, right? And even better if you can reference it later and tie it into a joke.
Totally.
Totally.
Right? It's really, it is true what you're talking about, that it is so, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, it is a good thing for the world that the barrier to entry to create something, put it online, and try to grow a business, that barrier to entry is very, very low now.
Yes.
That is a good thing overall.
I don't disagree.
What it means is that it's really hard to stand out.
Yes.
So it feels like, it's definitely something that you have done well with your personal brand. Statamic is also doing, in terms of the other content management systems out there, for sure. You've got the full stack, quote unicorn thing going on. You've got a really great sense of design. You've designed a ton of Laravel's official properties over the years, art direction for Laracon, which was so killer. And on the development side, you have built a content management system. So which came first for you, or what's your first love maybe? Is it design, or is it putting on headphones for 8 hours and getting lost in PHP functions?
Okay, so you actually have two different questions in there. My first love was writing. It was words. Storytelling. That has always been my first love. My original goal when I was in high school, actually since I was a kid, was to go to film school. I want to go to film school. I want to get into making movies. I want to be a director, producer. I want to be behind the camera somewhere in the creative seat. I enrolled in film school, met a girl, put it off, didn't go, never did it.
Never went.
Never happened. Not once. Not having been part of one movie, nothing. And it's a little bit sad. My best attempt to get close to that in college was marketing. I'm like, marketing's close to advertising. Advertising's like commercials. Commercials have cameras. Maybe I'll get into a movie set that way. I don't know if you ever went to school for marketing.
I did not.
It's not going to get you anywhere close to Hollywood. That's, that's fine. It's been an interesting path, and I don't regret it. Like it's been really great for my family. We're on a tangent now, but I wouldn't have the time that I have now with my family if I was on a set as some second, camera guy, like whatever. Who knows where I'd have been? Like maybe it worked out, maybe not. But you'd be on location, you'd be on set, unless you were in LA, in which case you're on, the 101 for 2 hours a day. So it's been a great path, but I missed telling stories. I missed, putting that out there. Fast forward a little bit, I got into programming before designing. So I got into web development as like a way of making money. I've always been a computer guy, so I could figure out like this website thing. Somebody wanted a website. I was working at another job. Like, does anyone know how to like edit this? And you're like, oh, I can figure it out. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so it was like figured out guy, because I feel like everybody who's like web developer is probably a figured out guy or girl, right? Pretty good, or else you don't last that long. So yeah, that's kind of one of the things I'm decent at, figuring stuff out, and sort of got into coding that way. Landed a job that was like half marketing, half front-end development, turned into full dev, got poached by another company to grow the dev side of the business. And so before you know it, I'm like, all right, this is my full-time job. I'm, building websites, which was fine. Like, it's cool. There's some video elements. I got to use, my camera sometimes, like shot some video for back, like I'll make it work. I'm at the back of my head. I'm like, somehow I'm going to make this jump somewhere.
Yeah.
But at this company I was at, that I'll remain nameless, that they didn't have good designers at all. I mean, it was like old school print designers that did that maybe could do some stuff for Flash, because it's like the early 2000s. And so I just, every time one of these designs came out, and I feel like I've got a decent eye. It's like, part of the creative aspect. And would drive me nuts. I don't know how to build this. Why is it in Illustrator in 2006 or whatever, 7? Definitely not the right tool for the job at the time. So I'd start taking these designs and I would just redesign them like myself and like fix them. And I just wouldn't tell anybody like who did them. Like I just put them in like the directories, like on the shared drive. It'd be like final like _2. And be like, oh, this looks better. Who did that? And like eventually I was like, it's me. And they let me design stuff. And so that's how I got into design. Now, to answer both questions, which do I prefer?
Yeah.
I think, to me, I prefer design because it's more creative. For me, like development, even though I got pretty good at it, I can do a lot of stuff. The development side is a means to an end. It's a way of getting the thing I want like onto the internet. It is, for me, it's not about like the craft. I don't nerd out about, patterns and, all that kind of, it's like whichever the right one is, I'll ask somebody like, is this a repository pattern, or is this a singleton? I'm like, copy and paste, like write my code. Design is different for me. It's telling the story. It's combining words. It's solving a problem. It is my movie, right? Like if you hit one of my pages from the top to the bottom, I'm hoping you have a certain experience that I've designed, by, going through the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's sort of like landed flat, but yeah, that's sort of my answer.
Yeah. No, that's so. You are clearly an artistic expressive person, and so so I want to go back. Like you mentioned, Statamic. It's taken 7 years. Like you started working on it in 2012, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
So as part of the artistic process of trying to get this thing out into the world, people using it, loving it, it growing, was
Mhm.
there a point that you thought, man, I want to create something and I'm going to do something, but this isn't it. It's not catching on. What was it that helped you stick with it, or made you stick with it?
It's probably the fact that the previous 5 things I tried, I gave up on. And I went,
Mm.
damn it, if it's anything, it's this, because it's already sold some, right? Like, it was out enough. Like, there was some people, I will just keep imposing my will on the internet until enough people, like, I will do client work and pay my guys with that money. And I will stay up all night and design, Laravel.com and, like, boom, pay my guys with that money. I will just keep shoveling coal into this train. And unfortunately, the thing that I learned later was, if I had actually just focused on it for a while without splitting my focus for such a long period of time, it probably would have gone so much faster. Like, if I had either, like, paused for 6 months, built up some money, and then jumped back in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways I could probably have done it a lot faster than, like, bouncing in and out the way I did. But we're still here, doing better than ever, having, more sites launching, bigger companies using it, better feedback than ever. So it's not worth it, right?
Yeah,
Not yet.
Yeah. So I'm just imagining, when you start working on this and start building it, and I mean, surely somebody's like, "Hey, you're building a PHP based CMS. You've heard of WordPress, right?"
I'd always say, what's that?
Why would you decide to compete against something with as much market saturation as WordPress and is largely free?
Yeah. I'll answer that question. I was going to say with another question, but now I can't phrase it as one. Remember when Microsoft had all the computers? I'm not going to compare myself to Steve Jobs. Please trust me. This is not about to happen.
This is about to get good.
We just kind of assumed that Microsoft would always own all of it. And Apple was a thing, and Next computers were a thing, and Linux was a thing. But Apple found a way to create a certain type of user that it was able to attract, right? And it wasn't everybody. It wasn't the governments, not at first anymore. But they had, look, if you want to be creative, come use an Apple. Hop on a Macintosh and see what you can do that you can't on Windows. And it's that idea, like that scrappy version, like, that doesn't have a yacht involved in any way. That's like, look, WordPress is it's the juggernaut. You could totally use it, and no one ever got fired for saying, let's just put it on WordPress. Like, that's a safe decision, right? Very safe. It takes a little bit of boldness to say, hey, let's use this thing I can barely pronounce, run by 3 guys that don't even sit in the same room. It doesn't even have a database. Like, you're already up against the wall on a couple of categories. And yet, when you do it, they're just, I get the emails all the time. This is so much fun. Like, this reminds me of when I was building sites, not with GeoCities, but like early days. Like, I just wanted to get it online, and nobody really cared what it took, right? It's that it just strips away all the stuff you don't need to focus on, like all of the 10,000 plugins. Like, it's most of the stuff you need is built in. Like, we just took care of that. And, we've created a product that's designed for a user that wants to create something from scratch. Mm-hmm. Most of the time with WordPress, you're not totally creating it from scratch. Like, you might have a theme or a design or whatever, and you sort of work it in and you bolt some stuff on. Yeah. But I would say the bulk of the WordPress sites out there are not from scratch.
Yeah.
Always exceptions.
Yeah.
But
the developer workflow for building a WordPress site is a colossal pain. It is not enjoyable. Yeah. And this is what is so interesting about about Statamic. And it is let me see if I can get this right the first time. It is both extremely developer friendly from a technical standpoint, but you've made a very strong case for, like, go all the way in the other direction of developer to like pure branding and like, who are you as a person? Are you a WordPress developer or are you a rebel? That is a pretty fascinating thing that you've managed to pull together here.
Yeah.
Was that like part of the vision from the beginning, or has it like emerged as the years have gone on?
It was always the idea, and I didn't always see the story. I didn't have the words to describe it at first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like I think, you get caught up in the product because if you don't have the product, it doesn't matter how well you market it. Like they try it and it doesn't work. So at first you're focused on the product. How does it work? And you really, because that's your big problem, you spend all your excitement is, look at this feature that we built. Like, can you believe it? We can do this now. And everyone else like, yeah, but like WordPress has been doing that forever. I'm like, yeah, but there's no database this time. So, it took a while to step back to like say, all right, I'm excited about features. Users are excited about features, but new people aren't, right? New like first time people are not so concerned about the new feature we just built because they probably assumed you had it already, or else they would have not looked at you. They didn't know that you didn't have like a WYSIWYG or something at one point. And so it in the early days, it took a while to come to the point where you can detach the story from the product. And because they're still connected, right? Like we are designing this product for this type of person. Your bullet list is different when you're talking about who you want to be and what you're building versus how you're building it. So if you go back through archive.org and you look at our homepages and stuff, at one point it was lots of features and like bullet lists and and then now you look at the site and like the /y page is like, hey, what is it now? I'm trying to remember. It's been like a week. I'm gonna literally read you a line or two. It's like, why is Statamic different? Shouldn't I just use WordPress like everybody else does? And I just talk about that. Like, yeah, it's not free, but you get what you paid for. Like, yeah, there's no database, but because of that, you can do all this other stuff. Like, hey, how can I learn this quickly? Oh, we have these great docs. Like, hey, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what I had to learn the hard way. And if I could go back, like, or if I ever build another product, I'm going to be thinking it from that angle versus like what my feature list is, or even like 101 marketing. Don't talk about your features, talk about the benefits. You're like, yeah, everybody sees that. Like, so like all that means is use the word enable a lot instead of does, right? Like I think my product enables you to, then it's the feature. So we've just like cleverly added more words.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a word nerd.
That's all good. All good. I want to ask you about the core platform differences are clear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about the surrounding ecosystem? And I'm curious on your take on it. WordPress has a big head start in terms of volume of tools. For sure, there's a ton of noise in their plugin directory. There's also a lot of valuable tools. I'm curious, like what's your take on the ecosystem at large and the plugin directory versus your add-on directory specifically?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the shape of our ecosystem does not mirror WordPress's. The things So the things that Statamic add-ons do tend to be pretty different than the things a WordPress plugin does. So, and correct, I mean, I'm not a big WordPress guy at this point, right? But like WordPress top plugins are, I don't know, SEO. Backups, like image sliders, like all of that kind of stuff, like a lot of like front end focused stuff, right? Like you install the feature and it gives you a thing on the front end of your site.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So in Statamic, almost all of the add-ons are things that give the developers better control or tools. Because the front end is yours. Like there's almost no and possibly none. I can't say that for sure because there's been some new add-ons. just about none, at least, add-ons that write markup for you. Like not like they aren't like there's no image slider plugin that drops image slider in that uses whatever JavaScript library. Everything is more geared towards like custom field types, like better ways of organizing and presenting data to your editor in the control panel, or like features that it doesn't have, like maybe e-commerce or like comments or something like that. So that the difference between that is, you as a developer don't have to rely on this one plugin to do your slider. You can pick whichever JavaScript library you want, just follow those basic docs, then loop through your images and inject them into it, and it works, right? Yeah. So you don't have to hack a plugin to get something to show up on your site. You just implement a library in the way that like you would normally without a CMS.
Yeah. Is that how do you envision it remaining that way?
I would imagine that it'll get blurrier over time, and that's just because of audience size, right? So the more people that use it, the more efficiencies there could be for building some of those things as people share them between sites. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
A lot of people use like little snippet libraries and copy and paste them between sites. Like, oh, here's my, like all the configs are in YAML files. So you just copy and paste the YAML file into the other site. Boom, all of your fields are set up. You're done. That kind of stuff is great. We'll probably start to see more like libraries and recipes and patterns as time goes on. We have some of that stuff now. But yeah, I mean, the flip side to that is the way that Statamic is built is significantly different than WordPress. So WordPress has the loop, right? All the content's kind of stored together all in one big blob, unless you're using advanced custom fields, which has this other pattern. Statamic is just each entry has whatever fields you would want attached to it, and then you can loop through those fields in your front end and show the data. So you don't, like the building block approach is different. You kind of build it up as you go instead of like kind of tearing it apart and pulling it down. And because of that pattern, there's a lot of things you can do with our built-in field types. Like if you don't need to have like an enable sidebar plugin. You just create a variable called enable sidebar, use a toggle so you can turn it on and off, and then just do an if enabled sidebar and then put your code in there. So since you're planning on touching your templates, those things get very simple. And there's that eliminate the thousands of WordPress plugins because you don't need them. They're just like these really simple like logic switches and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we could keep going, but like I would love it to get bigger. I'd love to see bigger things, and I think we're going to see that. I know a number of people from other platforms are starting to port add-ons and things to Statamic, which is interesting.
Yes. Is there
to see that?
Is there an add-on that you're just like anxiously awaiting someone to create and show up with?
I would love there to be a Shopify integration. That would be pretty sweet.
Why do you say that? Are you seeing a lot of
because like a lot of people want e-commerce, and who doesn't want to sell something and make money like easily on the internet? But every like self-implementable e-commerce site is like, I mean, they're really complicated to build. There's a lot of stuff you have to work out. And the Statamic approach to that, like give you all these templates and tags and, all these different things and extra screens it attaches to the control panel. I'm sure someone will do it. Like people have tried already. People have done that in Expression Engine, and like Craft has Craft Commerce, and it's this big thing. It's like a lot to build. I feel like Shopify has already done it. They already have all that stuff. Like the checkout's all sorted out, but people don't like managing the rest of the site in Shopify. They don't have the control they want, right? So if you could blur the two, like you go to the Shopify to checkout, but you can just pull your products and stuff into the Statamic site, that'd be pretty great. I think that'd be best of both worlds.
Yeah. Just curious.
Other than that, I mean, most of the add-ons are like all integration type stuff. Like integrate with, different Laravel packages, or integrate with, ConvertKit or MailChimp or whatever. Like that kind of stuff is pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah. The primary business model is selling site licenses. Is that
correct?
Is that correct? Okay. Do you have to spend any time like looking around for people posting your code or distributing it online? Are you worried about that at this point, or do you sell your license and you go on about your day?
I used to, and I would get all worked up about it, or, you'd get a Google alert and I'd see Statamic 1.9.2 cracked and nulled. I'm like, no. And you'd like try and, find it or whatever. I'm not saying I don't think about it, but we have validation built in. So it'll ping home and it'll, validate your license. And if it's invalid, it'll say you need to buy a license or insert a valid one. And then we get a red flag in our dashboard and we can see which sites are like the offending sites. And, every now and then, if there's I realize it's the same company with a bunch, I'll track them down. But I like the honor system. So since we're publicly talking here, I don't want to let myself be a pushover, but I tend to trust people. And sure, it's PHP. You could rip around, you could dig around the code and find it and rip it out. And then when you update it again, you have to rip it out again. At some point, just buy the license, right?
Yeah.
How much time are you spending ripping out the validation? Should I be obfuscating stuff and using FAR files? I don't know. I don't want it to suck for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so far, there's more than enough people who actually pay for it to pay our bills.
Respect your work. Yep.
Respect the work. And if you can't pay for it, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a special place for those people.
Yeah.
I guess.
Hey, listeners. We'll get back to the interview in just a second, but this is a great time to pause and let you know that Bright and Early is brought to you by Transistor.fm. Transistor offers you professional podcast hosting and analytics. They host this very podcast, and listen, y'all, it could not be any easier. Product is ridiculously easy to use. If you've got a question, Justin and John, the guys behind the software, are super responsive. I've needed to reach out a time or two for some help. They were all over it. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast for your business, just pop on over to transistor.fm and let them know that Brian sent you. Okay, Statamic's rich article editor is called Bard.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it called Bard, Jack?
This feels like a leading question. Because I'm a big D&D nerd. That's why.
Yeah. So I just started playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time in my life. Seriously, a month and a half ago. Tonight, in fact, I'm going to my third ever adventure.
Can we talk about this instead of Statamic? I feel like everyone's already bored. They either know the story or we've already sold them or scared them off.
Yes, we are in the wind down now, so we can just talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So tonight is my third ever time to play. A really good friend of mine and invited me several times. It never worked out, and then finally a month and a half ago, I was able to show up for a one shot, and I'm so hooked. So,
so much fun, right?
What is your background? When did you first start playing?
Playing D&D?
Yeah.
So the first time I played D&D, it was probably 1990. I don't know, 92, 93 or so. I didn't even know that's what it was called. I had a buddy from California, Dave Lewis. I've tried to find him for about 20 years now. So if he's listening to this, that'd be great.
Let's do it, internet.
Come on, Dave Lewis. Remember when you taught me to love D&D, but you called it that game in my head? He would come visit my neighbors from California, and we'd nerd out, watch Beavis and Butthead, play Secret of Mana on Super Nintendo, and play this game, and that was in his head. That was Dungeons and Dragons, right? Yeah. And so we would have the stat sheet, and he'd tell a story, and it was the coolest thing ever. I had never heard of anything before. We had a Christian family, and at that time,
Satanic Panic.
Exactly. Nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot stick.
Yeah.
And now we've all we've come around and realized it is what you make it. It is only what you make it.
Yeah.
And I got back into it. Honestly, it was right after Stranger Things season came out, right? I feel like that's probably everybody. You're yes, D&D, that's what we're missing. That's what's missing. Right? And so immediately, after that first episode, I'm oh, this is happening. Like I bought the books. I'm like called all my friends, like we're doing this, we're playing. And they're like, that sounds great. I don't have the time. I'm like, I'll DM, let's do this. And
Nice.
we've been playing, like I've been DMing, like this campaign's been going on over 2 years now. It's been
nice. Online?
No, like
or
local with a couple of friends locally here.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
There's definitely this resurgence going on. I mean, I say this as somebody who's only like I had the completely wrong impression of what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Yes. Most people do.
Yeah, definitely. The way I described it to my wife, who was like, "Wait, I'm sorry, you're doing what?" It's like, "Hey, listen,
pretending to be a goblin, or
actually a Furbolg druid."
Yes,
but no, it's like, have you ever been to a murder mystery dinner? Like, isn't that so much fun to do that for a couple of hours? That's a blast, right? Okay, that's like a really, really good movie. Mm-hmm. Dungeons and Dragons is like playing 8 seasons of The West Wing. It's like a series that just goes on. Anyway, is there you run like you have like a little side project like Dungeon Masters Academy, right?
Yep.
But that's like, is there any part of you that is like, is there a way to like take part in this resurgence and use your skill, overlap your skills and passion in a way?
Trust me, I've thought a lot about that, and I've put some effort into different ideas, and they just haven't panned out. And so I built my own site, and it gets like, I don't know, 6,000 or 7,000 visits a month, which is not a small thing for a site that has like 5 posts on it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to make, like, I will need 100 times as much to make some of the money back. And it's, it's just for fun. It's for the things like that I've learned for myself that I want to remember, I put on there. And, it's a fun design. Like, I really think it's a cool.
It is.
I mean, there's a lot of hot pink, but it works. Like, I really think that it works in like that D&D setting. Yeah. I love it. And I don't think any play in that universe is going to pay back the time it'll take to get there compared to other things. And so for me, it's just for fun. I love it. I love playing with my friends. Mm-hmm. Hopefully after we move to Florida, I'll get a nerdy group going down there or play online, on Skype or whatever with my buddies.
Yeah. Some things just need to remain a creative outlet.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. Right.
Yeah. Yep. So, and on that note of creative outlet, is relaunched your newsletter? Is like that a fair way to describe it? Or like,
I don't think I ever had a personal one before.
Okay.
Ever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you, anybody listening, seriously, jackmcdade.com/newsletter. It's like, is it purely creative expression, or is it part like, I need to grow the audience that will grow Statamic? Like what's your thought process there?
Yeah, there's really no Statamic angle on it at all. Yeah. It is mostly a creative expression, but I feel like there's things like I really believe in mentoring and teaching, especially younger people. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of young developers that follow me on Twitter, like Miguel Piedrafita and Luigi. I can't pronounce his last name. And there's a number of guys that just kind of like lap up they're at where I could see myself in them. Like I remember when I was that age and trying to figure stuff out. And, not that I control who is reading this, and I don't need to, but I feel like there's stuff that I have learned that I've got a pretty good grip on that I want to share. And this is how I'm doing it right now. What usually happens, and you probably know this feeling, is you're like, oh, I want to write. So I'm going to blog, where I'm going, right? But I don't like my blog. So I'm going to redesign and rebuild my blog on cool new platform. And by the time you're done, you don't have any time left to write. And so it sits until your next redesign. You never write. So I'm halfway through a site redesign and I like where it's going, but there's some things I got to work out and I don't have a lot of time. So I'm just writing. I don't want to put it up on the current blog because I don't like it. And I'm like, I'm just going to do a newsletter. Maybe some of these emails will eventually become posts or articles. Maybe they won't. But in the meantime, Yeah, I guess you grow a little bit of an audience. I'm not trying to like sell anything. I just sharing like basically kind of the idea is there's a story from my life and I connect that to a teachable moment and I'm going to try to make you laugh at least once. Like that's like my template. It's pretty broad and I feel like I could write about just about anything and somehow make it fit that. I've as a homeschooled, work for yourself, reject the corporate world, I feel a bit like a rebel. And I think that my way of doing stuff is not always the right way, but may have enough of a good idea in that if I share them, someone can take advantage of it. So that's the idea.
My guest today has been Jack McDade. Jack, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's do some closing thoughts here. I really enjoyed listening to Jack talk about design and his passion for that and for creating a memorable brand the way that he's done with his personal brand and with Statamic. We talked about it a little bit, how naturally it comes for him, at least the way that he's doing it comes naturally because he's sort of found his voice and his vocabulary, visual and actual words vocabulary. And it just makes so much sense. That's his best strategy for finding a way to stand out and finding a way for him and for his product to be memorable. And the way that I like the bit where he was talking about how if somebody's going to try your thing and they have to quit doing something else, there's something that they're currently using, even if it's not an exact match the way that Statamic and WordPress are an exact match, there is something else that they are using or hiring to get that thing done for them. And so in order for them to try your thing out, they're gonna have to quit that. And it can't be one for one trade. People like their habits way too much. And so has to be 5 times better in some sort of way, 5 times more delightful, 5 times easier to use, 5 times cheaper for the same features. And I'm not going to say 5 times the features for the same price. I think that's a losing strategy. But it has to be 5 times, better in some sort of way. And the successful way that Jack has done this with Statamic is just it's 5 times easier to use, at least, than WordPress. And it's just so much more delightful to be a Statamic user. I mean, I'm speaking from like personal experience here, and just the way that I brought it up in the interview, that he has on at a scaled down version done a similar. I know he didn't want to compare himself to Steve Jobs, but there's at least a comparison to the way that Apple has branded themselves, compared to other types of PCs that you could use. That's the kind of the same vibe, that I think that he wants to create amongst Statamic's users. Is you don't want to be a WordPress developer, do you? You want to be close to the code. You want to build things from scratch. You want to be a rebel. And I think he's doing that very, very effectively. It's inspirational. It's inspiring to me. I really, really liked hearing that come out in the things that Jack was saying. So seriously recommend that you follow along with what he's doing. Let's see. I love that line. Every cliche in your writing is an opportunity to do something memorable instead. Like what a great like principle to keep in mind. Go through your landing page. Makes me want to go back through my old newsletters, or all the articles that I've written, and find cliches. I wonder, that'd be something pretty cool for Grammarly to add, wouldn't it? Like, hey, this is a cliche. Do something fun here instead. That's interesting. I like that as a principle. Back in art school, they would our teachers would have us like however far into a painting or a drawing, and they would have us always do two things. One was to turn it upside down, literally, like rotate the canvas 180 degrees, and that was to kind of help you just get a sense for the composition itself, and it just makes it easier to look at the forms and the shapes. You're not seeing the subjects. The other thing that one of my drawing teachers would always, a painting teacher actually, would always have us do is if you're not 80% of the way done, and there was one particular piece of the painting that you were just really attached to for whatever reason, then she would say, just paint over it and redo it. You'll get too attached to it. There's something about that too that's like, don't get so attached to cliches and things that things that are just kind of coming out or that you're getting attached to or whatever. Go back through your writing and turn it upside down, as it were, or find a piece of it that you're getting a little bit too attached to and rethink it and see if there's something that you can do to make it a little bit more memorable instead. I like that as a principle for a landing page, for an application, anything and everything. That's just great. And another thing, this reminds me a whole lot about from the conversation with Leanna Patch several episodes ago. Like, you have to be memorable and special now. There's just so much out there, and you have to find a way to stand apart. So the advice, like to take away from this interview with Jack, to say, hey, you got to make your product memorable. And so use flashy 80s nostalgia art and funny like documentation. That is bad advice, because that's not you, or maybe it is, then go for it. But that's Jack. So it's not to saying this is what has worked. This is how Jack McDade has made himself memorable and different and special. So do that. It's what is the thing that you do so well that it feels like play to you and it looks like work to everyone else. Maybe you're obsessed with customer service and you love talking to people and you're just a helper at heart. That it may feel weird to you to learn that there are people out there who get annoyed when they have to help somebody else, but you're just obsessed with customer service. And so you know what? Yeah, you can have a templated site that looks a lot like every other landing page out there, but you have ridiculously memorable customer service. That is you. And it would be worth interviewing you about why you are so obsessively great at customer service. Or maybe you're a developer who has always loved documentation and you love well-written, well-formatted, absolutely perfect documentation. Well, your app can have the best developer docs in the world, and developers will love you, and they won't care that your site does not stand out in terms of visual design. I think that's the thing. Be memorable, be special, but to do that, you can't act. You have got to know yourself and be yourself. So find the thing that comes naturally to you, what feels like play, looks like work to everyone else. So I would love to know what you think, though. What stood out to you in this particular episode? Anything else always means a lot to hear from those of you who are enjoying the show. Let me know what you like, what could be better, and how I can make it. How I can make it better for you. This is your show. Wanted to help you out. You can find me on Twitter. I am B-Ray. That is BRHEA. B as in barbarian, R as in rogue, H as in halfling, E as in elf, and A as in archer. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.